A mother betrayed, a daughter lost, and a crime that shocked the community. This is the story of Carly Gregg, a 15-year-old who shocked everyone when she took her mother's life and smiled for the camera. Stay tuned, as this story will make you question everything about family and trust. In the small town of Brandon, Mississippi, as the day came to a close, the sun cast a warm, amber glow over the sleepy streets. Families were settling in for the evening, children playing in their backyards, and parents preparing dinner in the comfort of their homes. It was a scene of tranquility, a picture-perfect moment of suburban life. But for one family, hidden behind closed doors, this evening would be anything but ordinary. Carly Gregg was just 14, a typical teenager navigating the ups and downs of high school life. Her mother, Ashley Smylie, was a beloved math teacher, known throughout the community for her dedication to her students. Ashley's husband, Heath Smylie, was expected home later that night. From the outside, they appeared to be the perfect family, living an idyllic life in a quiet town. But appearances can be deceiving. Behind the smiles, beneath the laughter, there were secrets. Dark secrets that no one could have imagined. What happened next inside that home would send shockwaves through the entire town. It began with a sound that shattered the evening calm. Gunshots. Echoes of chaos and screams pierced the air. Harmed. But the real question remained. What led to that horrifying moment? How does a seemingly ordinary teenage girl go from attending school in the afternoon to pulling the trigger on her own mother? What hidden forces were at play, driving Carly Gregg to this unthinkable act? On the surface, Carly was just another teenager, trying to fit in, trying to find her way. But behind closed doors, she was living a double life, one filled with hidden cell phones, secret conversations, and a growing darkness that no one, not even her mother Ashley, could have seen coming. It was March 19th, a day that began like any other. Ashley, ever the devoted mother, had picked up Carly from school. To anyone watching, it was just another routine afternoon. But inside the house, as the door clicked shut behind them, something shifted. Carly's demeanor was off, her eyes darting around, her movements tense, as if she was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But why? What was she planning? The house was unusually quiet, a silence that hung in the air like a warning. Ashley had no idea of the storm brewing beneath her daughter's calm exterior. In Carly's mind, something had snapped, and there was no turning back. But what could drive a child to such a terrible act? Was it rage? Was it fear? Or was it something far more sinister? Something buried deep within her that no one could reach. As the evening wore on, Carly made a choice that would forever change the lives of everyone around her. She reached for a dirigible .357 Magnum hidden away in the house. But why did she choose that moment? What was the breaking point that pushed her over the edge? In a matter of minutes, the peaceful home was torn apart by the sound of gunfire. The echoes of the shots reverberated through the quiet neighborhood, but for Carly, it wasn't over yet. With a chilling calmness, she picked up her phone and sent a text message to a friend, inviting them over to see the emergency. Imagine being that friend, receiving a message like that, only to walk into a nightmare. The moment they arrived, Carly greeted them with a question that would haunt them forever. Have you ever seen a dead body? What drives someone to ask something so cold, so detached? Was this a desperate cry for help? Or was it something far darker, a twisted sense of satisfaction? This is the story of Carly Gregg, a story that began with laughter, family and love, but ended in horror and heartbreak. What seemed like a perfect life in a quiet town unraveled in a single catastrophic moment. Behind the closed doors of their home, secrets festered, darkness grew, and no one could have foreseen the tragic end that was coming. For Heath Smylie, the drive home that evening was just like any other. He was expecting to walk into the warmth of his family's home, to be greeted by Ashley and Carly. But as he pulled into the driveway, he noticed something strange. The house was almost completely dark, save for a single flickering light from the kitchen. The sense of unease settled in his gut, but he pushed it aside. Little did he know, he was stepping into a nightmare. What Heath saw next would be forever etched into his memory. As he entered the kitchen, the scene that greeted him was something out of a horror film. The once warm and inviting space was now drenched in darkness, illuminated only by the glow of the refrigerator light. And there, lying in a pool of her own blood, was Ashley. Ashley's lifeless body was twisted in an unnatural angle, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Heath's mind raced, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. The smell of gunpowder still lingered in the air, mingling with the coppery scent of blood. In that moment, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. But Heath's horror didn't end there. As he turned around, he was confronted by a sight that chilled him to the bone. Standing in the dim hallway, her face partially obscured by shadows, was Carly. In her hands, she still held the .357 Magnum. Her expression was blank, almost emotionless, as if she were detached from the chaos around her. For a brief moment, the two of them just stared at each other. Heath, struggling to process what he was seeing, and Carly, standing motionless with the gun in her grip. But then, as if snapping out of a trance, Carly raised the weapon and fired. The shot missed its mark, striking Heath in the shoulder instead of his head. The force of the impact sent him crashing to the floor, pain searing through his body. But even in that moment of agony, Heath's survival instincts kicked in. He wasn't about to let Carly finish what she had started. What followed was a desperate struggle for survival. Heath, bleeding and disoriented, managed to wrestle the gun out of Carly's hands. The once sweet, innocent girl he had raised was now trying to kill him. The realization was like a knife to his heart. What had gone so wrong? How could the girl he loved as his own daughter have turned into a cold-blooded killer? As the police arrived, the scene they walked into was one of utter chaos. Heath was on the floor, bleeding and exhausted, while Carly lay pinned beneath him, her eyes wild, but her face eerily calm. The officers quickly pulled Heath away and restrained Carly, her hands now cuffed behind her back. But even as she was taken away, Carly remained disturbingly calm. There were no tears, no signs of regret, only a distant, vacant expression, as if she were lost in a world of her own making. The question that lingered on everyone's mind was, why? What had driven this once normal teenage girl to commit such a monstrous act? The peaceful facade of the Smylie household had been shattered. News of the horrific event spread like wildfire through the town of Brandon, Mississippi. The once quiet suburban neighborhood was now the epicenter of a chilling crime that left everyone asking, how could a seemingly normal teenage girl commit such an unspeakable act? As Carly was taken into custody, the reality of what she had done began to set in. The local community, the friends and neighbors who had known the Smylie family, were left in shock. But as the investigation unfolded, it became clear that this tragedy was far more complex than anyone had imagined. What could drive a 14-year-old girl, to such an act of violence? To answer that question, detectives needed to dig deep into Carly's life. They began to piece together a story of secrets, lies, and a teenage girl spiraling out of control. It started with something seemingly harmless: Carly experimenting with newfound independence, staying out late, sneaking a few drinks at parties. But soon, things took a darker turn. On taxiway, and Heath didn't know was that Carly had been living a double life. On the surface, she was the typical teenager, balancing school, friends, and family. But behind closed doors, Carly was engaging in risky behaviors, experimenting with drugs, sneaking out, and using secret phones to communicate with people her parents had never met. Carly's descent into darkness didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process, one that was carefully hidden from her parents. But there were signs, subtle changes in her behavior, mood swings, and sudden outbursts that Ashley dismissed as typical teenage angst. But Ashley's patience had its limits. As Carly's behavior became more erratic, Ashley decided to take matters into her own hands. One day, after Carly left for school, Ashley searched her daughter's room. What she found was beyond anything she could have imagined. The discovery left Ashley stunned, heartbroken. She had always believed that Carly was just going through a phase, that her rebellious behavior would pass. But now, faced with undeniable evidence, Ashley realized just how far her daughter had strayed. The confrontation that followed was explosive. Ashley, desperate to save her daughter, threatened to take away her phone, ground her, and cut off all her social connections. But Carly, feeling cornered, lashed out in a fit of rage. She screamed, accused her mother of trying to control her life, of not understanding what she was going through. What Ashley didn't realize was that her desperate attempt to reach Carly had pushed her daughter further away. To Carly, it felt like her entire world was collapsing. She felt trapped, suffocated by the expectations and rules that her mother tried to impose. Carly's journal entries revealed a dark and twisted inner world. She wrote about feeling like a puppet, controlled by forces beyond her understanding. She described the voices that haunted her, pushing her to do things she didn't want to do. But were these truly the ravings of a tormented mind, or was Carly playing a carefully crafted game? As the detectives delved deeper, they began to wonder, was Carly truly a victim of her own mind, driven to madness by her inner demons? Or was she a master manipulator, using the guise of mental illness to mask her true intentions? As the investigation came to a close, the trial of Carly Gregg began. What had started as a horrific family tragedy had now turned into a high-profile court case that captivated the entire town of Brandon, Mississippi. The once quiet suburban neighborhood now found itself under the harsh spotlight of the media, as reporters and onlookers crowded outside the courthouse, desperate for answers. Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Carly, now facing first-degree murder charges, sat silently beside her defense attorney, her hands folded in her lap. The girl who once smiled innocently in family photos was now fighting for her life. But this was no ordinary trial. It was a battle between two conflicting narratives, one of a cold-blooded killer and the other of a mentally ill teenager lost in the depths of her mind. The prosecution wasted no time painting Carly as a calculating murderer. They argued that this was not the act of an impulsive teenager, but a carefully planned execution. According to their evidence, Carly had shown clear intent, she knew where the gun was, she chose her moment, and she lured her stepfather home with a text message after killing her mother. But the defense painted a very different picture of Carly. They claimed that she was not a cold-blooded killer, but a deeply troubled teenager suffering from severe mental illness. They brought in experts to testify about Carly's deteriorating mental state, her history of mood swings, and the voices that had haunted her for months leading up to the crime. The defense argued that Carly had been prescribed a new medication just days before the shooting, a medication that could have exacerbated her symptoms, pushing her into a state of paranoia and delusion. But was this enough to explain her actions? Or was Carly simply using her mental health as a convenient excuse to avoid the consequences of her crimes? To prove their case, the defense presented Carly's journal entries as evidence, claiming they were the desperate cries of a teenager who had lost her grip on reality. But the prosecution was quick to counter. They argued that these entries were nothing more than a manipulative ploy to set the stage for her defense. The prosecution also pointed to Carly's actions immediately after the crime. The fact that she calmly texted her friend to come over and see the emergency, the way she manipulated her mother's phone to lure Heath into a trap. These were not the actions of someone lost in a psychotic episode. They were the actions of a girl who knew exactly what she was doing. But the defense was relentless in their argument. They called Carly's childhood friends to the stand, who testified about her struggles with anxiety and depression. They described a girl who was once bright and full of life, but who had become withdrawn, paranoid, and deeply troubled in the months leading up to the crime. The trial dragged on for weeks, each side presenting their evidence, their witnesses, their experts. The jury was left with an impossible question. Was Carly truly out of her mind, driven to murder by the voices that tormented her? Or was she a manipulative teenager who had meticulously planned the murder of her mother and the attempted murder of her stepfather? In the end, the fate of Carly Gregg lay in the hands of 12 jurors, ordinary people forced to decide whether she was a cold-blooded killer or a broken child who had fallen through the cracks of a failing system. The decision they made would determine whether Carly would spend the rest of her life behind bars, or if she would be sent to a psychiatric facility in the hopes of rehabilitation. After weeks of intense testimonies, emotional confrontations, and countless hours spent examining the evidence, it all came down to this moment. The jury had spent 2 long days in deliberation. Now, as they re-entered the courtroom, everyone held their breath. The air was thick with anticipation, a collective anxiety that seemed to weigh down on everyone present. For Heath Smylie, the drive home that evening was just like any other. He was expecting to walk into the warmth of his family's home, to be greeted by Ashley and Carly. But as he pulled into the driveway, he noticed something strange. The house was almost completely dark, save for a single flickering light from the kitchen. The sense of unease settled in his gut, but he pushed it aside. Little did he know, he was stepping into a nightmare. The jury foreman's voice was steady, yet filled with the weight of the decision he was about to announce. When the words "guilty of first-degree murder" finally left his lips, the room seemed to shudder. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by the sound of stifled sobs. Carly remained motionless, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere in the distance, as if she had already accepted her fate long before this moment. For some, this verdict brought a sense of justice, a belief that the right decision had been made. But for others, it was just the beginning of a deeper, more painful journey. How could a family so full of life and love be reduced to this moment of utter devastation? The sentence was as harsh as the crime itself. life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The words hit the room like a thunderclap, sealing Carly's fate. There would be no second chances, no opportunity for redemption. The young girl who once dreamed of a future was now condemned to a life behind bars. As the sentence was read, Carly was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs. Her steps were slow, almost reluctant, as if each step brought her closer to an abyss she could not escape. But still, her face remained a mask, devoid of any visible emotion. Was this the calm acceptance of someone who had lost everything, or the cold detachment of a mind that had given up on hope? The streets outside the courthouse were filled with onlookers, divided in their reactions. Some cheered for the justice they believed had been served, while others quietly wept for the life that was now lost forever behind bars. But for Heath Smylie, the sentence brought little comfort. The wounds inflicted on his heart would never fully heal. How does one move forward after losing not just a wife, but also a daughter in the span of a single devastating moment? Heath's life, once filled with laughter and love, was now a hollow shell of what it had been. Could he ever forgive Carly for what she had done? Or would the betrayal haunt him for the rest of his days? Now, locked away in a cell that would be her home for the rest of her life, Carly must confront the choices that led her here. Was she truly driven by the voices in her head? Or was it something deeper, a darkness that no one had ever seen? The questions remain unanswered and haunting. And for Heath, can he ever find it in his heart to forgive, or is the pain of betrayal simply too deep?
Just everything she did, she planned out for Carly and around Carly.
Tell us about yours and Carly's relationship before March 19, 2024.
We were always good. We laughed and played and messed around, loved video games, and took her to karate stuff until she kind of got tired of that, and she started going to guitar practice weekly, so I was taking her to that every week. We got along great.
We want to hear your thoughts. Was Carly a cold-blooded killer, or was she a broken teenager who slipped through the cracks? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more true crime story. Thanks for watching.